Yes, David Meredith and I have known each other for a long time. We first met in the midst of another epidemic many years ago, decades ago, of a new mysterious disease. That one turned out to be AIDS. Being first recognized in 1981 with no known virus or cause or reason, with uncertainties about how it was spread, first appearing in major cities and then spreading to rural areas all across our country, no quick treatments, painful, horrible deaths, keeping families separated in fear, changing housing arrangements, working conditions, sometimes keeping children out of schools, even changing the way infection control techniques were applied in hospitals. David and I have talked a bit about how this experience reminds us of those days. And back then, we thought life would never return to normal. Normal. But somewhere between 1981 and 2020, normal returned. But in looking back, sometimes we long for those good old days. So that's what brings me here today. My career in public health, my experience as a grief recovery method specialist, and my faith. The three pieces that make me who I am. So I am so thankful that my faith in God, whose number one message is love, brought me to this place so that we could be here today to talk about grief in the context of God's faith and God's faithfulness for us. So David's preaching in the next several weeks about the exodus of the Hebrew people out of Egypt, and he's tying that story to our coronavirus experience. And my task is to explore these stories in the perspective of grief and in recovering from grief. So let's start with some definitions. First, grief is the normal and natural response to change or loss of any kind. It's about way more than just death, change or loss of any kind. So what kinds of things have we changed? We've lost our routine. We've lost our normal. Changes in our work lives, changes in our social lives, changes in our religious lives, changes perhaps even in our family relationships. Staying at home, wearing a mask, 6 feet distance, not touching the ones we love, seeing violence erupt when people disagree, sometimes even disagreements among family members or friends, not knowing what to believe in the news or in our social media feeds. We have experienced a lot of changes in our normal or in our routine. Those are griefs. Those are losses. Second, grief is also about the loss of intangible things, such as our hopes and dreams and expectations. No graduations, no funerals, no weddings, no vacations. Retirement funds? Those are going to change. Our hopes and dreams and expectations. Intangible things. We've lost some of those as well. We don't know what the future will be like. What is our expectation? What was it? What will it be now? And we don't even talk about usually those intangible things. We don't sit down and articulate what are our hopes and dreams and expectations. Other intangibles, things like our sense of safety, trust, health, the economy, our sense of even our faith or home or hope. We've lost a lot, haven't we? Even in those intangibles. The third definition makes it even more complex because grief is also about mixed emotions, making us feel even more confused about what it is we feel and if we should feel that way. For example, I'm scared that someone I know might get sick, but I'm thankful that so far no one has. I am also worried about our economy, but I'm also confident in most of my fellow Americans that we will recover. The United States will recover. Our economy will recover. It might not be soon, but it will recover. I'm also glad and thankful that I have the luxury of working from home and still being paid, while being safe there, and yet I feel sad that others I love don't have that luxury. They're either still needing to work in one of those essential jobs, or they're incarcerated without a hope of even social distancing, or they're confined to a senior living facility with no exposure to the outside world at all for months now. That's also grief. So how does this tie to the Exodus story and to our story? Well, those Hebrews were grievers before they left Egypt, just like we were grievers before the coronavirus pandemic came our way. For decades, those Hebrews had been oppressed, enslaved, treated inequitably by those who lorded it over them. Remember all those plagues? That all happened before Pharaoh let them go. So, do you remember 3 or 4 months ago those horrible wildfires in Australia? I wonder whatever happened to those. And what about the controversies within our own United Methodist Church? We were hoping and expecting by the spring of 2020 that controversy would also have been solved by now, that some negotiation, some solution might have been found. And the political griefs that we were experiencing, yeah, those were here before the coronavirus too. And do you remember there were earthquakes and tsunamis and droughts? Then came the pandemic. And even in the midst of the pandemic, we've had earthquakes and floods and even rumors of hurricanes that will soon be forming in the Atlantic Ocean. And giant murder hornets? Have you heard of the giant murder hornets? Are you kidding me? Seriously? Giant murder hornets? Sounds a lot like pre-wilderness Egypt to me, don't you think? So finally Pharaoh said, sure, let them go. Let them have what they want. Let them have what they've been begging for. Let them have their freedom. Just like some have been shouting here lately to reopen our state. Let us go. We demand our freedom. So our political leaders are saying, okay, fine, you asked for it. We're reopened for business as usual. Only nothing is really as usual. So we find ourselves again in a wilderness of emotions, conflicting emotions, mixed emotions, challenged hopes and dreams and expectations, a plethora of changes in our routines. I suggest that there's very little in our lives that is like what it was before coronavirus. And we really don't have a very good idea yet of how we're going to get out of this wilderness or through this wilderness, nor what the promised land will be like when we get there. And just like the Hebrews began to question Moses, we might be questioning our leaders too, political and government leaders, economic leaders, academic leaders, religious leaders. Gosh, it'd be so good to go back to the way things were. But remember, we were grievers before the coronavirus pandemic. We all had plenty of loss and change in our lives, and fear and concern in various areas of our lives. This current situation has simply added to that grief. Yes, we're grieving the loss of the past, the fear of the present, and the unknown of the future. So where's the hope? Where's the good news? Well, in Exodus, it says that the Lord went before them into that wilderness. And I believe God goes before us in this wilderness too. One of my favorite biblical phrases is this one, and it came to pass. Did you notice that phrase in Exodus 13:17? And it came to pass. And yes, this will pass too. It will, just not quickly. It says that it's so that it might be so that they weren't tempted to go back. Maybe they were even just so lost they didn't know how to get back. Either way, the only way they could go was forward, just like us. And God went before them. And they complained that the wilderness was worse than the slavery, just like some of us complain that these coronavirus precautions are worse than the threat of illness or death itself. And we might wonder, where is God in our story? Did God cause this? Or if God didn't cause it, why doesn't God fix it? Why doesn't God solve it? Make it go away. Our brains struggle to find the answers to these questions while our hearts continue to break. Finding a reason, an answer, won't make our grief go away. Reasons won't wipe away tears. God is not unaffected by our time in this wilderness either. I believe God weeps with us. I believe God gets angry and frustrated with us, both alongside us and sometimes because of us. I believe God is concerned for us and with us. And I believe God is also determined and confident that we will find our way through this wilderness. and that we'll somehow be better for having been in it. And yet I believe God also holds us close and comforts us and using some age-old tools. And there's where the good news begins to come in. We are not alone in this wilderness. God goes before us. Our faith partners go with us, and others will come after us. For me, one of those comforting tools is music. Old favorite hymns, and now, especially some contemporary Christian music. A song by Jason Gray, for example, Remind Me You're Here, speaks so well, I think, to where we are in our wilderness, asking God, are you cruel if you caused it, or are you weak if you allowed it to be? And then praying, God, remind me you're here. I want and I need to believe that God is here, that God is near me through this. That's the foundation of our faith, isn't it? That God is with us. When my faith wavers, I need to be reminded in very real ways, reminded that indeed God is here. Our wandering leaves us wondering, God, are you really here? Some key tools shared in the grief recovery method help me to be reminded and to know that indeed God is near. While the grief recovery method is not a churchy program, I believe God is all over it. And this is what God reminds me through the grief recovery method. First, tell the truth about yourself. If it's not a good morning, don't agree to that. Tell your truth. If you're not fine, tell your truth. Did you know that in the grief recovery method we define fine as feelings inside not expressed? F-I-N-E, feelings inside not expressed. How many times when somebody says, hey, how are you? We just respond, I'm fine, how are you? If that's not your truth, don't say that. Find some other way to say what is your truth. Well, I'm having a tough day, but thanks for asking. I'm a little on edge. I'm a little anxious right now, but thanks for asking. It's been a tough week, but I think it's getting better, but thanks for asking. Every time you tell your truth, your heart sighs a sigh of relief. You've told your truth. Even that's biblical, isn't it? Doesn't it say, I think it's in the book of John, I think it's Jesus who said it, tell the truth. The truth will set you free. It sets our hearts free when we simply tell the truth about how we feel. And I'll bet you've sung another song with lyrics in it too that speak to this issue. What a friend we have in Jesus. That song talks about all our sins and griefs to bear, and how needless pain we bear, all because we don't carry everything to God in prayer, because we don't give voice to how we're feeling, to what our griefs are. Second, the second tool, identify and name those feelings and give them voice. Don't let them ferment inside your heart. Have you really thought about your feelings? Even the conflicting ones. List them, write them down, and then find someone that you can share them with. Find someone to tell. Simply name those feelings. Give them voice. Someone who won't analyze, judge, or try to fix your feelings. They'll simply listen with dignity and respect, so that as you give voice to your feelings, you'll know they're being heard. Just speaking out loud what your feelings are takes away some of the power of those feelings. They're not hiding inside you anymore. You chose to name them and to speak them. The third tool, try to live in the moment. Yes, I know. I'll bet you've heard that before. Live in the moment. But maybe you, like me, have asked, how the heck am I supposed to do that with all the stuff that's happening? With all the stuff I'm regretting and missing and grieving from the past? With all of the worries and the things that I have uncertainties about in the future? How am I supposed to live in the moment? How can I not be bouncing around between the past and the future? Well, in the grief recovery method, we talk about that too. And several months ago, I heard a really good way to remember to live in the present moment. And simply, it is to breathe. Just breathe. Maybe you've heard that too. Just breathe. The piece there is, focus on your breathing. Focus on the inhaling. Focus on the exhaling. several times if you need to. Focus on the inhaling, focus on the exhaling. Here's why that works. And when I heard it, it made so much sense to me. It's this: you can't breathe in the past, and you can't breathe in the future. You can only breathe in the present moment. I'll say that again. You can't breathe in the past. You can't breathe in the future. You can only breathe in the present moment. Even in the way we were born to breathe, God has given us the perfect tool to remind us to stay focused in the present moment, simply by breathing and focusing on those breaths. You cannot breathe in the past, and you cannot breathe in the future, only in the present moment. The final tool in the Grief Recovery Method program is that we have choices. Remember that no matter what's happened or what's happening in the world or in our communities or our families, we always have choices. For many of us, when we're grieving everything we've lost, we begin to feel like we're a victim or that we have no control or no power in our lives. Everything is just in chaos. But we do still have choices. We may not be able to change what's happened, or we may not be able to choose what's happening now, but we all have the ability to choose how we respond to that. In the Grief Recovery Method, we talk about needing only 1% responsibility, taking just 1% responsibility for how we respond to our situation. That reminds me of a biblical story as well. When Jesus met the paralyzed man out by the pool, Jesus was a great healer. He could have clicked his fingers and healed that man. But he asked him, "Do you want to be made well?" That paralyzed man only needed the 1% responsibility for wanting to be made well. It's the same with us. When we're anxious or confused or sad or conflicted or angry, whatever those feelings are, do we want to be made well? Do we want to be made calm? That's our choice. We get to choose. Jesus knew that that man had to want to be made well. Otherwise, it wouldn't last. He would soon be back out by the pool, paralyzed by his fear, his wanting to be back in the pain of the past where at least things were comfortable and familiar. Just like the Hebrews were tempted to think that being enslaved in Egypt was a better choice than going forward through the wilderness to the promised land. So when you feel afraid or anxious or terrified or paralyzed by your circumstances during these coronavirus days, ask yourself first, do I want to be made well? Do you want to see the promised land? Whatever that will be. As for me, I get to choose. You get to choose. And I choose yes. I want to survive this thing. I want to hug my kids again. I want to be able to have dinner at a restaurant with my friends. I want to be able to gather again and worship with my friends in a wonderful congregation singing those songs that we all love. And beyond that, I want to rededicate myself to advocating for those who once again have been enslaved by the inequities of our past normal. I choose to try to learn from this experience, from this wilderness time. I choose to try to find a way out of this plague that brings those others with me. The black and the brown, the LGBTQAI+, the incarcerated, the elderly, the young, the unemployed, the hungry, the refugee, the immigrant, those of other faiths or no faith, the sick, the homeless. Let this pandemic, this wilderness time, reaffirm our faith that indeed God is here, right here with us, right here in our midst. And let us reaffirm our efforts to bring others through this wilderness with us. And in so doing, help them to see that God is right here with them too. Let us be even more the hands and feet of God in our communities. I'd like to leave you with a short prayer. I don't remember exactly where I found it. I've come to find out that it's something in the Catholic tradition that they're sharing with their members to encourage them through these times. One of the choices that I've made is to not watch the evening news, to turn off the television and to not watch the news in the evening, but instead to turn on some Christian music and to memorize and say this short prayer in the evening before I go to sleep. Perhaps you'll choose to do the same or something similar. We can't change the current situation. We can't change the current wilderness that we're in, but we can all choose how we respond to it. I choose to move through. I choose life. I choose hope. Here's the prayer. Dear Lord, help me to be prepared, but not anxious, to be aware, but not desperate, to be vigilant, but not fearful, to be joyful, but not clueless, to be faithful, but not careless. Lord, be my hope and my strength. Amen. Thank you for allowing me to join you today on your journey through the current wilderness. And remember, it came to pass. Thank you.